The desert sun blazed mercilessly across the 29 Palms training facility as Staff Sergeant Maya Chin stepped out of the transport vehicle, her boots hitting the packed sand with quiet precision. The camera crew was already setting up their equipment near the long-range shooting complex, their lenses gleaming like predatory eyes in the harsh California light. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen how assumptions can be wrong in your own community. Maya adjusted the strap of her gear bag, her movements economical and purposeful, while 3 male soldiers lounged in the shade of a concrete bunker nearby. "Look at this," Rodriguez muttered to his companions, nodding toward Maya as she approached the photographer. "Another diversity photo shoot." Sergeant Williams chuckled and shook his head. "But she's never even fired that rifle she's carrying." The third soldier, Corporal Davis, watched Maya with narrowed eyes as she methodically checked her equipment. "Probably can't even tell you which end the bullets come out of," he said with a smirk. Maya heard every word, but her expression remained unchanged, her dark eyes scanning the range with the same intensity a hawk uses to study its hunting ground. The photographer, a civilian contractor named Jenkins, waved Maya over to a predetermined position near the shooting bench. "All right, Sergeant, we need some action shots for the recruitment campaign," he said, adjusting his camera settings. "Just handle the rifle naturally, maybe sight down the scope a few times." Maya nodded silently and moved to the bench where a pristine M24 sniper rifle waited, its metal surface already warm from the desert heat. Behind her, the 3 soldiers had moved closer, their conversation carrying clearly across the still air. "This is such a joke," Rodriguez whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "They put her in BDUs, and suddenly she's Annie Oakley." Williams snorted with laughter. "Wait until she tries to shoulder that thing properly. The recoil will probably knock her flat on her back." Maya's hands moved over the rifle with fluid precision, checking the bolt action, examining the scope mounts, and testing the trigger pull with practiced familiarity. Her movements were economical and sure, each motion flowing into the next like water finding its path downhill. The photographer started clicking away, capturing her profile as she settled naturally into the shooting position. Jenkins paused, lowering his camera slightly. "Huh," he murmured to himself. "She actually knows what she's doing." The observation hung in the air like smoke from a discharged round. Maya settled into the prone position behind the rifle, her body forming perfect alignment from heel to shoulder in a way that spoke of countless hours of training. The stock nestled against her shoulder with familiar comfort as she adjusted the bipod legs with minute precision. Jenkins continued shooting photographs, but his attention had shifted from capturing stage poses to documenting something genuinely impressive. "She's got textbook form," he thought, watching through his viewfinder as Maya's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm every sniper learns to master. The 3 soldiers had grown quieter, their mockery replaced by grudging curiosity as they watched her work. "Look at her playing soldier," Davis muttered, but his voice lacked the earlier conviction. Rodriguez stepped closer, studying Maya's position with the critical eye of someone who knew enough about marksmanship to recognize competence. "That's not beginner's luck," he said quietly to Williams. Williams shrugged dismissively. "So she took a class somewhere. Doesn't mean she can actually hit anything." Maya's finger found the trigger guard, her eye aligned perfectly with the scope as she tracked across the range markers. 200 meters, 500 meters, 800 meters. Her movements were fluid and instinctive, like a musician's fingers finding familiar notes on well-loved keys. The range safety officer approached the group, clipboard in hand and sweat staining his uniform. "Range is hot for live fire if anyone wants to do some actual shooting," he announced. "We've got targets set at various distances." Williams looked at his companions with a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Hey, Sergeant Shun," he called out, "since you're here and all dressed up, why don't you try some real shooting instead of just posing?" Maya lifted her head from the scope and turned toward the soldiers, her expression calm and unreadable. The photographer lowered his camera, sensing the shift in atmosphere, like an animal detecting changes in weather pressure. Rodriguez nudged Davis with his elbow. "This should be entertaining," he whispered. "Let's see how she handles live rounds." Maya rose from the shooting position with fluid grace, checking the rifle's safety before responding. "What distances do you have available?" she asked, her voice steady and professional. The range officer consulted his clipboard. "Standard targets at 100, 300, and 600 meters. We also have a long-range course extending out to 1,500 meters for qualified personnel." Williams laughed out loud. 1,500 meters? That's almost a mile. Let's start her off easy, maybe the 100-meter targets, so she doesn't embarrass herself too badly. Maya simply nodded and began preparing the rifle for live fire. The ammunition arrived in a metal box that clinked softly as the range officer set it beside Maya's shooting position. "Match grade 7.62 NATO rounds," he said, handing her a loaded magazine. 20 rounds should be plenty for demonstration purposes." Maya accepted the magazine with practiced ease, her fingers automatically checking the weight and balance before inserting it into the rifle with a satisfying click. The three soldiers gathered behind her, their earlier casual mockery replaced by anticipatory interest. "This is where reality hits fantasy," Davis said quietly to his companions. Rodriguez nodded, crossing his arms as he watched Maya chamber around. 100-meter target shouldn't be too hard, even for a beginner. But watch her flinch when that rifle kicks. Maya settled back into position, her body language displaying the kind of relaxed confidence that comes only from extensive experience. The photographer continued documenting, but now his camera captured something more compelling than staged recruitment photos. Through his lens, he watched Maya's breathing slow to the measured rhythm of a trained marksman. Her "I found the scope," and the world narrowed to the relationship between crosshairs and target. The wind was negligible at this distance, barely stirring the range flags. Maya's finger moved to the trigger with deliberate precision, applying steady pressure as her breathing reached the natural pause between exhale and inhale. The rifle cracked with authority, sending its projectile downrange at over 2,700 feet per second. Maya absorbed the recoil with practiced ease, her body barely shifting as the muzzle climbed slightly before settling back on target. The brass casing ejected in a perfect arc, landing with a metallic ping on the concrete beside her. Through the spotting scope, the range officer watched the 100-meter target with professional interest. "Dead center," he announced, his voice carrying a note of surprise. "Perfect bullseye." Williams blinked, his confident smirk faltering slightly. "Lucky shot," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Rodriguez stepped closer to the spotting scope, peering through the eyepiece to confirm what the range officer had reported. The bullet hole was indeed perfectly centered in the target's innermost ring. Maya worked the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a fresh round with fluid precision. Her movements were economical and sure, betraying no excitement or satisfaction at hitting the target. Jenkins continued photographing, but his focus had shifted entirely from posed recruitment shots to capturing genuine marksmanship in action. 4 more shots followed in rapid succession, each one accompanied by the same controlled recoil and smooth bolt manipulation. The range officer's voice grew more impressed with each call. "Center, center, dead center." Another perfect center shot. 5 consecutive bullseyes had silenced the casual banter among the 3 soldiers. Davis shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence evaporating like morning dew under the desert sun. "Maybe we should move her back to the 300-meter targets," he suggested, his voice lacking the mocking tone from earlier. Williams nodded eagerly, grasping for ways to restore his wounded pride. "Yeah, 300 meters. That's where you separate the real shooters from the lucky ones." Maya cleared the rifle and stood, stretching slightly before gathering her equipment. The photographer followed her movement, capturing the fluid grace with which she handled the precision instrument. At 300 meters, wind becomes a factor, the range officer explained as they moved to the appropriate firing line. You'll need to account for bullet drop and atmospheric conditions. Maya nodded silently, settling into her new position with the same methodical precision she had displayed earlier. Through her scope, the target appeared significantly smaller, a mere speck of concentric circles floating in the heat shimmer rising from the desert floor. Rodriguez consulted his watch nervously. 300 meters in these conditions, he muttered to Williams. Even experienced shooters struggle with that distance. The wind flags along the range fluttered inconsistently, indicating variable conditions that would challenge even skilled marksmen. Maya observed them carefully, reading the air currents like a sailor reading the sea. Maya's shots at 300 meters proved equally devastating, each bullet finding its mark with mechanical precision despite the shifting wind conditions. The range officer's calls of center hits echoed across the facility like a funeral dirge for the soldiers' assumptions. William's face flushed red with frustration and embarrassment. His voice cracked slightly as desperation drove him to make an impossible suggestion. "Fine," he said, pointing toward the distant mountains where the extreme long-range targets waited. "Let's see how she does at the 15-mile marker." Rodriguez stared at his companion in disbelief. 15 miles? That's over 26,000 meters. Nobody shoots that distance. Even our best snipers max out around 2 miles. Davis nodded emphatically. That's not even realistic combat shooting. That's like trying to hit a dime from orbit. The range officer lowered his binoculars and turned toward the group with professional concern etched across his weathered features. "Gentlemen, the 15-mile course requires special authorization and equipment. We're talking about ballistic computers, atmospheric monitoring equipment, and custom ammunition loads." Maya stood quietly beside her rifle, listening to the conversation with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the afternoon. Her dark eyes tracked toward the distant mountains where the impossible target waited, invisible even through the most powerful optics available. Maya spoke for the first time since the shooting began, her voice carrying quiet authority that cut through the desert air like a blade. "I'll need the CheyTac M200 from the armory," she said simply, along with the ballistic computer and atmospheric station. The range officer's eyebrows shot upward in surprise. "You're familiar with the CheyTac system?" he asked, his professional skepticism warring with growing curiosity. Maya nodded once, her expression remaining neutral. "Also the custom .408 loads, mil-spec primers, and an environmental monitoring package." Williams laughed nervously, but the sound came out hollow and forced. "She's just naming equipment she's heard about," he said to his companions. "There's no way she actually knows how to use that stuff." Rodriguez had grown increasingly quiet, his earlier bravado replaced by uncomfortable uncertainty. The range officer studied Maya with the keen eye of someone who had spent decades around military personnel. Her technical knowledge was too specific, too precise to be casual familiarity. Against his better judgment, he found himself reaching for his radio. "Control, this is Range 7. Requesting authorization for extreme long-range equipment deployment." 20 minutes later, a specialized vehicle arrived carrying equipment worth more than most people's houses. The CheyTac rifle system emerged from its protective case like a sleeping giant awakening, its massive scope and precision-machined components gleaming in the afternoon sun. Maya approached the CheyTac rifle with reverent familiarity, her hands moving over the equipment with the confidence of long practice. She connected the ballistic computer and atmospheric monitoring station with practiced efficiency, calibrating sensors and inputting data with mechanical precision. The three soldiers watched in stunned silence as she worked, their mockery finally dying completely. "This isn't her first time with this equipment," Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible. The range officer positioned himself behind the spotting scope, its powerful magnification trained on a distant target barely visible as a speck against the mountainside. Maya settled behind the massive rifle, adjusting the bipod and stock with minute precision. Her breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm of extreme, long-range shooting, each exhale measured and deliberate. The ballistic computer displayed complex calculations accounting for wind speed, humidity, temperature, altitude, and the Coriolis effect of Earth's rotation. Maya studied the data briefly before making final adjustments to the scope's elevation and windage turrets. The target waited 15 miles away, a distance so extreme that the bullet would take nearly 30 seconds to reach its destination. Williams found his voice in a strangled whisper. "There's no way anyone can make this shot." Maya's finger found the trigger, applying steady pressure as her world narrowed to crosshairs in mathematics. The Chaytak rifle thundered with devastating authority, its muzzle brake redirecting gases in controlled fury as the massive .408 caliber bullet began its impossible journey. Maya absorbed the substantial recoil with practiced ease, her body perfectly positioned to manage the rifle's violent energy. The bullet streaked across the desert at over 3,000 feet per second, carrying with it the hopes and doubts of everyone watching. 28 seconds stretched like eternity as the projectile followed its calculated arc through the atmosphere, fighting wind resistance and gravitational pull across 15 miles of open terrain. The range officer kept his eye pressed to the spotting scope, watching the distant target with professional intensity. Williams held his breath unconsciously, his earlier confidence replaced by nervous anticipation. Rodriguez checked his watch, counting the seconds until impact. Jenkins continued photographing, his camera capturing the tension etched on every face present. Davis found himself silently hoping she would miss, not from malice, but from a desperate need to preserve his understanding of reality. The seconds ticked by with mechanical precision until the range officer's voice shattered the silence like breaking glass. "Direct hit," he announced, his voice carrying disbelief and professional admiration. "Dead center impact on target." The words hung in the air like smoke from the discharged rifle, their implications slowly sinking into the consciousness of everyone present. The stunned silence stretched across the range like a physical weight until Williams finally found his voice. "How is that even possible?" he whispered, staring at Maya with newfound respect and bewilderment. The range officer lowered his spotting scope and turned toward the group, his weathered face displaying professional admiration mixed with obvious curiosity. "Sergeant Shun," he said carefully, "that shot just broke several facility records. Mind if I ask about your background?" Maya stood and began securing the Chaytak rifle with the same methodical precision she had displayed throughout the afternoon. "Staff Sergeant Maya Chun," she said quietly, United States Army Marksmanship Unit. Current world record holder for confirmed long-range precision shooting at 26.4 miles. The revelation hit the three soldiers like a physical blow. Rodriguez felt his knees weaken as the implications sank in. Davis stared open-mouthed, his earlier mockery now seeming criminally stupid in retrospect. Williams could only manage a strangled apology that died in his throat. Jenkins lowered his camera, realizing he had just documented something extraordinary rather than routine recruitment photography. Maya shouldered her gear bag and prepared to leave, her expression unchanged from the calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the entire demonstration. If this story amazed you, drop a comment about your favorite moment or tell us about a time when someone surprised you with hidden talents. Sometimes the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about people based on appearances alone.